Hi, I'm Robert Paul, and I would like to introduce my father, Lane Paul.
We're trying to train them young, another generation. Thank you very much for coming out on this cold day. I've been telling them, and yesterday we had a series of interviews because we had very good news this week. We announced that we raised $1 million this quarter. This is more than any other candidate in the race. The only danger is we've had such a good time being the underdog, they're now asking us, what's going to happen if you're in the lead? What are you going to do if you're the leader in the race? There you go. There you go. We're excited about how far we've come, and the thing we emphasize about the money we've raised is it's come from over 13,000 donors. The average donation is $75 or under. Our people are not people who want something from government. They want to be left alone from government. I run for office not because I need a job or because I need some sort of approval or need some kind of great office. I run for office because I'm worried about our country. I'm worried about the deficit. I'm worried about the deficit becoming so large that it consumes us as a country. We've been a great nation. We used to export goods. We used to make manufacturers that went around the world. But our greatest export now is the debt. We sell our debt. We're the world's greatest debtor nation. We owe the Chinese $800 billion, the Japanese $700 billion, the Saudis $100 billion, the Taiwanese $100 billion. The list goes on and on and on. The greatest debtor nation known to man. I don't think you can do it forever. We've been doing it for over a generation now. Last year we had a crisis in this country, and the answer was basically just to double the monetary base, to say, here's more money. We have politicians in Washington who say the answer is, just go to the mall. Here's $250. Go to the mall and spend it. Well, we all know that that doesn't work. You can't borrow money to give to your kids and say, here's $250. You eventually have to pay back that $250 if you borrow it. They can't give you $4,500 to go buy a new car and think everything will be okay. It's not real wealth. It's an illusion. And I think we're smart enough to know that that's an illusion, but ultimately we'll pay for it. And people say, oh, we will pay for the debt through our children and our grandchildren, but I think it's more imminent than that. We're going to be paying for the debt through higher prices. All of that money, doubling of the monetary base, that money's not in the economy yet, but when it gets into the economy, we're going to have inflation worse than 1979. Out of the turmoil that comes when you destroy a currency, sometimes awful things can happen. Some of you have read about the Weimar Republic in 1923. You've seen the pictures of people with money in wheelbarrows. The money became so worthless so quickly that workers demanded to be paid at noon and at 5 o'clock every day. They wanted their money by noon because it was worth half as much by 5 o'clock. People say, oh, this is America. It could never happen in America. We're on that road if we're not careful. An interesting statistic I saw the other day, over half of the money, over half of the U.S. currency currently is overseas. We've had a great situation. We import more than we export, and so we send those dollars overseas. We export our dollars, so we export our inflation. That money goes overseas, and that's where it resides because other countries' paper currencies have been worse than ours. But the tide is turning. You'll see news reports where China is buying gold. I like to tell people that there's a Chinese floor under gold right now. Gold's over $1,000. Every time it dips down below 1,000 or gets close to 900, the Chinese buy more. They're worried about our currency. The world is worried about our currency, and ours is the most stable. What happens when ours deteriorates or fails? Out of the chaos of the Weimar Republic in 1923, when the money was carried around in wheelbarrows, you got Hitler. Hitler elected. When you have unrest and you have civil disorder, there is a concern. We need to be active in case things get that bad. We need to have alternatives. We need to have people who can represent us if things become that bad in our country. Even if they don't get that bad, we need to be prepared and have solutions. We need to have other answers. The deficit this year will be $1.75 trillion in 1 year. People say, I can't imagine what $1 trillion is. If you take $1,000 bills and you start stacking them in your hand, 4 inches high, you'll be a millionaire. If you had 4 inches of $1,000, if you wanted to stack $1,000 bills and equal $1 trillion, it would be 67 miles high. It's hard to imagine $1 trillion. The debt next year will be 13% of the gross national product. Spending is at 28% of the gross national product. We are spending money at $53,000 a second. Our government is out of control. Some say, oh, well, we just need a Republican. Well, not any old Republican's going to do. We had Republicans in charge for 8 years and the debt went from $5 to $10 trillion. You have Republicans in office. You had a senator from Alaska who his whole job and his whole means for being in Washington was to bring pork home to Alaska, the road to nowhere. You've got a Democrat senator over in West Virginia, Burr, who's been there for 50 years, and his whole purpose in life is to bring the pork home. They asked me yesterday in a conference call, are you going to bring the pork home to Kentucky? Are you going to bring this project and that project? And I said, I will not earmark anything because we have no money. I will not place earmarks. Now, does that not mean things will be spent? We spend $4 trillion and we're only bringing in $2.4 trillion. If we brought in $2.4 trillion, we spend that, and some of that should be spent in Kentucky. But I can't spend money or say I can bring something or bring a project to Lancaster if we have a $1.75 trillion debt. And that's a disservice. You need someone who will stand up and say no. I will, as the first bill I introduce, if I am elected, introduce term limits. We must limit their terms. They cannot be trusted. The second thing I will introduce is a rule to balance the budget. We can either have a rule in Congress or a constitutional amendment, either one, but they have to have a rule. In Kentucky, we have a rule. At the end of the day, Republicans and Democrats fight back and forth, but they have to balance the budget in Frankfurt by the end of the year. That's the only way you'll ever do it in Washington, is if you have a rule. We can't win these battles yet. We can't win the term limits or the balanced budget, but you need someone from your state and for our country who has a loud voice and says, we will balance the budget and we have to do it. We will limit their terms. I will stand up on the floor of the Senate and every appropriations bill, I will say, we're 20% over budget. Here's an amendment. We'll reduce it by 20% and then I'll vote for it. We may not win those battles initially, but what we need to do is stand up and believe in something again as a party. The Republican Party platform says we don't believe in bank bailouts. We don't believe in bailing out any of your private businesses. It's a tough world, but you have to make a profit, and that's the way capitalism works. But what do we do as a Republican Party? Over half of your leadership voted for $1 trillion bank bailout. They're still doing it. Everybody's lining up for the bank bailout. The automobile industry lined up. Chrysler went bankrupt and they used the bank bailout bill to then say to the AFL-CIO, the union, that you get leapfrogged over the teacher's pension plan just because we want to. But they pointed back to the bank bailout. You have to have new leadership. I don't think you'll get it from the career politicians. I think you need someone who's an outsider, someone who's a small businessman, and someone who will go up there and try to shake up the system and then come back home to Kentucky and live under the laws. We need to bring people home. We need a lot of them to come home. And I think this is an opportunity. I told people yesterday when we had a media conference call, I said, it's the year of the outsider. If there ever was a time, you've seen these tea parties, if there ever was a time that the outsider can win, this is the year we can do it. And I hope you will get behind me. I hope you will help me. And I thank you very much for coming out in the cold. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball. Give him another warm welcome and round of applause.